A world map drawn in stone reveals a startling pattern. Pyramids in Egypt mirror those in Mesoamerica, while stone circles in Britain find cousins in Japan. This video explores a provocative idea, a first global era, a prehistoric time when distant cultures may have been connected long before our history books say it was possible. By the end, you will see ancient history not as isolated chapters, but as a single, interconnected story that could rewrite our past. We will decode the silent language of shared monument designs, asking if these architectural echoes are mere coincidence or the blueprint of a forgotten network. How did ancient builders separated by vast oceans arrive at such similar visions? What does this pattern suggest about the very nature of human ingenuity? The answers lie in the geometry of megaliths and the celestial alignments of temples, a puzzle spanning continents. What do you believe is the true story written in these ancient stones? The concept itself is a quiet revolution in how we view the ancient world. This first global era is not a date on a timeline, not a chapter in a textbook. It is a proposed idea, a window of time stretching from the dawn of agriculture to the early use of metals, a span of millennia where humanity may have been far more connected than we ever realized. It predates the famous voyages of Columbus or Zheng He by thousands of years. This is not about documented trade routes or written treaties, but about something far more subtle and profound, the exchange of world-changing ideas. The central question this framework asks is a simple one. When we see the same architectural fingerprint on opposite sides of the planet, are we looking at independent invention or evidence of a conversation? To answer that, we need two key ideas from archaeology: diffusion and convergence. Diffusion is the spread of a concept through contact, like a story passed from one person to another across a continent. Convergence is when different cultures facing similar challenges arrive at similar solutions entirely on their own. Think of two isolated tribes both inventing the bow and arrow for hunting, a brilliant but independent breakthrough. The framework of a first global era suggests that for some of humanity's most monumental ideas, diffusion might have been the real architect. It proposes a hidden web, connections woven not by empires, but by small groups, ancient mariners, migrating families, or pilgrims carrying sacred knowledge across land and sea. The evidence for this forgotten network does not lie in ledgers or chronicles. It is waiting silently in the aligned stones and raised earth of our planet's oldest monuments. These shared architectural blueprints are not vague resemblances but precise engineering choices. Across continents, ancient builders selected a common vocabulary of stone, a set of solutions so specific they form a silent technical language. In the rolling landscape of Carnac, France, thousands of standing stones march in eerie rows, a monumental effort of alignment and placement. Far to the south, on the sun-baked plains near Tia in Ethiopia, similar carved stelae stand sentinel, their surfaces etched with symbols we are still learning to read. The distance between them is staggering, yet the impulse to raise great stones and arrange them with purpose appears to be a shared chapter in a global story. The technical parallels become even more striking when we look at the joinery. At Stonehenge, the famous lintels are not merely balanced atop the uprights, they are locked in place with carved protrusions and sockets, a technique known as the mortise and tenon joint. This same sophisticated method, a hallmark of advanced woodworking, appears thousands of miles away in the oldest temples on the Mediterranean island of Malta. Here, massive stone blocks were also connected using these precise fittings, creating stability that has endured for millennia. It is as if both cultures had access to the same instruction manual for monumental construction. Another widespread technique is the art of stone shaping. Builders from the Andes Mountains of Peru to the Giza Plateau in Egypt mastered the method of carefully working stone faces so they would fit together without mortar, interlocking with such precision that a knife blade cannot slip between them. This pursuit of perfect seams required not just immense labor, but a deep, transmitted knowledge of geometry, leverage, and material science. So we are left with a compelling puzzle. Do these common techniques represent a universal human response to the same challenge, like different cultures independently inventing the wheel? Or do they point to something more interconnected, a shared megalithic toolkit that was carried, adapted, and implemented across the ancient world? The mystery deepens when we ask what these structures were for. Their functions, as diverse as the cultures that built them, consistently reveal a profound connection to the cosmos. Many megalithic sites are not random collections of rock, they are carefully calibrated instruments. Stone circles and aligned avenues often frame the sunrise on a solstice or track the cycles of the moon. This celestial obsession is a thread that binds these distant sites, suggesting that the builders were not just erecting monuments, but anchoring their understanding of time, seasons, and their place in the universe into the very landscape. This shared gaze toward the heavens may be the most powerful clue of all, hinting at a common foundation of knowledge that once flowed across the prehistoric world. The sky itself may have been the first shared blueprint. When we look beyond the stones and the shapes to what these monuments were built to see, a remarkable pattern emerges. From the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of Mesoamerica, ancient builders consistently encoded the movements of the sun, moon, and stars into their architecture. This was not just art or ritual, it was a sophisticated science of timekeeping written in stone. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, is aligned to true north with a precision that rivals modern instruments, an engineering feat that speaks to a profound understanding of the celestial sphere. Far across the world, at a place called Fajoda Butte in New Mexico, a spiral petroglyph is pierced by a dagger of sunlight that perfectly marks the summer and winter solstices, a natural calendar carved by human ingenuity. Then there is the Mayan pyramid of Chichen Itza, known as El Castillo. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the play of light and shadow creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down the staircase, a breathtaking merger of astronomy, architecture, and mythology. These are not isolated examples. Stonehenge frames the midsummer sunrise. The massive stones of Nabta Playa in the Sahara align to key stars. This recurring theme, this global obsession with anchoring buildings to cosmic events, presents us with a fascinating puzzle. Were priest astronomers in every culture simply looking up at the same sky and independently arriving at the same need to mark its cycles in monumental form? That is certainly possible, a powerful example of convergent thinking, but the framework of a first global era asks a different question. Could this represent something more like a disseminated science, a shared body of knowledge about the rhythms of the cosmos that was carried, taught, and adapted as people moved? The complexity of some of these alignments goes beyond simple sunrise markers. They track lunar cycles that last decades, or pinpoint the rising of specific stars that only occur every few generations. This suggests a long-term, accumulated understanding, a science that required careful observation over centuries. The idea of a prehistoric science network is not about a single teacher traveling the globe, but rather about the slow, persistent flow of a powerful idea, that by understanding the heavens, you could predict seasons, plan agriculture, and organize society. This celestial code, etched into monuments worldwide, becomes a potential key. It hints that the true connection between these distant cultures may not have been trade in goods, but trade in knowledge, a shared quest to read the clockwork of the universe. And if they were sharing this knowledge, what other ideas were traveling along the same hidden pathways? To answer that, we must look at the most personal and profound of human creations, the symbols they left behind. Perhaps no single shape speaks to this mystery more powerfully than the pyramid. Its stark geometry appears across the globe, a silent testament to a shared architectural dream. In Egypt, the smooth-sided pyramids of Giza are icons of eternity. In the ancient city of Mesopotamian ziggurats rose as stairways to the gods. Across the ocean, the stepped pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico and Angkor in Cambodia dominate their landscapes. Even in North America, the great earthwork platform known as Monk's Mound at Cahokia follows this same foundational principle. The distances involved are almost incomprehensible, yet the form persists. So what binds these structures beyond their basic shape? The constants are telling. Many are precisely aligned to the cardinal directions, a feat requiring advanced understanding of astronomy. They are almost always built in tiers or steps, a design often interpreted as a symbolic ladder for spiritual ascent, connecting the earthly realm with the celestial one. Frequently, they served as the heart of ceremonial life or as resting places for revered individuals, anchoring the sacred to a specific point in the landscape. This convergence presents us with a riddle at the heart of the first global era idea. Is the pyramid simply the most logical, stable form for building something monumental toward the sky, a shape so obvious that countless cultures invented it independently? That is one compelling answer, yet the consistency in their ceremonial purpose and celestial alignment gives us pause. Could it be that the pyramid was more than just a good engineering solution? Could it represent a potent symbolic idea, a package of beliefs about the cosmos, authority, and the afterlife that was carried from one culture to another? The slopes of these structures, pointing toward a common ideological peak, suggest that the blueprint for reaching the heavens may have been a piece of knowledge too valuable not to share. If that is true, then the movement of ideas must have been facilitated by someone. This leads us to the most human element of the mystery, the potential carriers of this ancient knowledge. Who were these people? The stones and pyramids tell one story, but the very ground beneath them whispers another. Scratched into the earth and carved into rock across the world are recurring geometric shapes, a silent visual language that seems to transcend culture and time. This is the domain of sacred geometry, where pattern itself becomes a monument. In the ancient tomb of Newgrange in Ireland, a great stone is engraved with a triple spiral, a motif of breathtaking complexity. Thousands of miles away, the vast Nazca lines in Peru include a giant spiral etched into the desert floor. Even in the ancient rock art of Aboriginal Australia, the spiral appears as a powerful symbol. It is as if the same swirling idea emerged independently from human imagination on 3 separate continents. But the spiral is just one thread in this global tapestry. Concentric circles, those rings within rings, form the basis of stone circles from Britain to the Middle East and are replicated on a colossal scale in geoglyphs like the Great Rings of Saudi Arabia. Then there is the vesica piscis, a shape created by the overlap of 2 circles, a form found in the sacred architecture of Gothic cathedrals and encoded within the floor plans of temples from India to ancient Mesopotamia. So what are we seeing here? One compelling explanation comes from the field of psychology. The thinker Carl Jung proposed the idea of archetypes, fundamental symbols and patterns buried deep within the collective human unconscious. From this view, the spiral might represent the journey of life, the circles, the cycles of nature, universal concepts that any human mind, anywhere, might naturally express. It is a beautiful idea that these shapes are a shared dream of our species, yet another possibility is far more tangible. Could these patterns be more than symbolic art? Could they be the practical fingerprints of a prehistoric science? Some researchers suggest these recurring geometries, especially when found in massive earthworks, point to an ancient system of geodesy, the science of measuring the Earth. The consistent use of circles, alignments, and specific ratios might indicate a shared method of surveying, of mapping sacred landscapes according to a universal mathematical plan. A stone circle is not just a ritual space, it is a perfect geometric form imposed upon the land. A network of aligned mounds could be a way to chart territory, to mark solstice lines, to create a giant coordinate system. This transforms the mystery from one of shared dreams to one of shared knowledge. Were these patterns a kind of prehistoric blueprint, a technical language for understanding and organizing the world itself? The patterns themselves do not give a definitive answer, but their persistent echo across the globe is a profound clue. They suggest that the connections of a potential first global era were not merely about exchanging how to build, but perhaps about exchanging how to see, to measure, and to encode meaning into the very fabric of the world. If a spiral in Ireland and a spiral in Peru can speak to the same human experience or the same mathematical principle, then the distance between them suddenly feels much smaller. This geometric thread leads us to an even more startling possibility, that this shared language was not just for marking the Earth, but for navigating the vast and empty seas that supposedly kept these ancient worlds apart. The silent language of sacred geometry points toward a world far more navigable than we once believed. To explain how a pyramid blueprint or a stone working technique could appear on opposite sides of an ocean, we must seriously reconsider the ancient seascape. The vast, empty blues on our maps may not have been barriers at all, but highways. This is the maritime diffusion hypothesis, the idea that long before the age of exploration, prehistoric cultures possessed the skill and courage to traverse open water, carrying not just goods, but the very seeds of civilization itself. We have tangible proof that such voyages were possible. In the mid-20th century, the Kon-Tiki expedition captivated the world by crossing the Pacific on a simple balsa wood raft, demonstrating that ancient designs were perfectly seaworthy. Centuries earlier, the Phoenicians were legendary navigators of the Mediterranean. But what if they were not the first? What if they were inheritors of a much older maritime tradition? The evidence for these potential prehistoric highways is compelling. In the Mediterranean, the discovery of the Uluburan shipwreck, a vessel from the late Bronze Age, revealed a cargo of astonishing diversity: copper ingots, glass, ebony, and amber, sourced from at least 7 different cultures. This was not a casual trip, it was part of a sophisticated, interconnected trade network. Along the Atlantic seaboard, megalithic structures dot the coasts of Europe, and intriguingly, similar forms appear in ancient North America. Could knowledge have traveled with the currents, following a sunken coastline route now lost to time? Then there is the Indian Ocean, where predictable monsoon winds act like a natural engine, powering a circular trade route between Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia. These were not random voyages of desperation, but likely seasonal journeys planned and repeated over generations. The technology certainly existed. We find depictions of sophisticated sailing vessels in ancient Egyptian art, and cultures from the Polynesians to the Vikings developed distinct but highly effective boat-building traditions, using carved hulls, woven sails, and a profound understanding of stars, waves, and bird flight to guide them. This brings us to the most controversial pieces of the puzzle, artifacts that seem wildly out of place. Objects like the Bat Creek stone found in Tennessee and bearing inscriptions some argue resemble ancient Hebrew or potential Roman coins discovered in the Americas. Mainstream archaeology often dismisses these as hoaxes or misidentifications, and for good reason. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Yet, within the framework of a first global era, they prompt a vital question. If we accept that people could cross oceans, is it so unthinkable that a few small, personal items might have traveled with them? The real evidence may be less about a single coin and more about the cumulative weight of shared ideas, the nautical knowledge that made such accidental landings possible. When we look at the global map of megaliths, we are not necessarily looking for a single fleet of explorer priests, but for the slow, persistent diffusion of concepts along coastlines and across narrow seas, a creeping dawn of connection where each successful voyage expanded the network. The ocean then transforms from a wall into a web. If ancient mariners could navigate by the stars to build celestial monuments, is it not logical that they could also navigate by those same stars to share the blueprint for building them? This reimagining of our ancient past does not diminish the genius of individual cultures, but rather embeds them within a larger, more dynamic story of human interaction. It suggests our ancestors were not isolated tribes staring at their own campfires, but nodes in a vast, whispering network connected by the daring of sailors and the universal language of stone and sky. Climate itself may have been the silent architect of this ancient network. When we think of forces powerful enough to reshape human history on a global scale, we often think of wars or empires. But a far greater, more relentless pressure was the changing sky and the shifting earth. Major climatic events, like the Great Thaw at the end of the last ice age or a profound drought that gripped the planet around 4,200 years ago, did not just alter landscapes, they rewrote the human story. These were not mere changes in weather, they were existential challenges that forced entire populations to move, to adapt, and to interact in unprecedented ways. As glaciers retreated and sea levels rose, vast coastal plains that were once home to early societies vanished beneath the waves. What happened to the people who lived there? Their world literally sinking, they would have become migrants, carrying with them not just their possessions, but their most vital knowledge, their stories, their understanding of the stars, and their methods for building in stone. This dispersal could have seeded similar ideas along new coastlines and river valleys thousands of miles apart. Similarly, a megadrought could empty a fertile region like the Indus Valley, or turn the green Sahara into a desert, sending waves of people outward in search of water and stability. These were not random wanderers, they were communities with deep cultural memory. Wherever they settled, they would seek to recreate a sense of order, to build structures that connected them to the cycles of nature they depended on for survival. This perspective transforms our understanding of these ancient monuments. A pyramid or a stone circle is no longer just a temple or a tomb. It becomes something more profound, a response to trauma, an act of cosmic reassurance. When your familiar world is swept away by flood or famine, how do you re-establish your place in the universe? You build something permanent, something aligned with the unchanging heavens. You create a giant calendar to better predict the coming seasons because your survival depends on it. You erect towering stones that might commemorate a lost homeland across the sea or honor the ancestors who guided you through the crisis. The shared architectural language we see across continents, then, might be the shared language of resilience. It is the blueprint of a people trying to make sense of a chaotic world, to impose human meaning upon environmental forces far beyond their control. The climate did not just push people around the map, it may have been the very engine that set ideas in motion, distributing the tools for cultural survival, the knowledge of astronomy for navigation and agriculture, the techniques for monumental construction to create new centers of identity along the pathways of human migration. This deep connection between environmental pressure and cultural expression suggests that the greatest monuments of antiquity are not just feats of engineering, but also profound statements of hope built by survivors. The precision of these solar alignments is not a matter of chance, it is an exact and repeatable science. To understand its potential as a shared technology, we must step inside the temples themselves and watch the ancient machinery at work. In the heart of the Great Mound of Newgrange in Ireland, a narrow roof box, a carefully engineered slit above the entrance, waits in darkness. For just a few minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, a beam of sunlight pierces this opening, travels down a 60-foot stone passageway, and dramatically illuminates the central chamber. This event is so precise it feels like a switch being flipped, a moment of celestial validation engineered 5,000 years ago. An entire continent away, high in the Andes, the Incan Temple of the Sun at Machu Picchu performs a similar miracle. A strategically placed window in the temple's curved wall allows the rising sun on the June solstice to strike a ceremonial stone altar within, bathing it in a golden rectangle of light. Even the Great Sphinx of Giza, gazing eternally eastward, participates in this global choreography. On the spring equinox, the setting sun aligns perfectly between the pores of the Sphinx and the southern face of the Copper Pyramid, a momentary alignment that speaks of deliberate planning on a monumental scale. What we are observing here is a specific liturgical technology. It is not just about building toward the sun, but about capturing its light and directing it with purpose. The architectural mechanisms are remarkably consistent: light shafts, aligned windows, and specially positioned altars or stones that serve as focal points for the solar beam. These are not passive structures, they are active instruments. The builders understood solar geometry to an astonishing degree, calculating angles of incidence and designing apertures that would filter and focus the light for a specific, brief, and powerful ritual moment. This raises a profound question about the nature of invention. Is it more likely that priest architects in Ireland, Peru, and Egypt, separated by oceans and millennia, all independently conceived of the exact same complex method for trapping the solstice sun inside a stone chamber? Or does this precision point toward a shared body of knowledge, a global priestly science that understood the sun not just as a god, but as a measurable, predictable force whose power could be literally channeled through architecture? The purpose behind this technology feels universal. In the depths of winter, the Newgrange solstice beam was a promise of the sun's return, of life defeating darkness. For the Inca, the illumination of the sacred stone affirmed the divine right of their ruler and synchronized their agricultural calendar with the cosmos. In Egypt, solar alignment reinforced the pharaoh's role as the living son of Ra. While the cultural meanings differed, the core function was identical: to create a tangible, awe-inspiring link between the human and the celestial, to make faith visible. This case study of the Sun Temple network presents us with a compelling choice. We can marvel at the independent genius of our ancestors, their brilliant minds arriving at the same exquisite solution under different skies. Or we can consider the framework of a first global era, which suggests these temples are not separate inventions, but local adaptations of a profound and mobile idea, a liturgical blueprint for harnessing the ultimate source of power. If such a blueprint was carried and adapted, it implies a conversation, however indirect, that spanned the ancient world. But the solar temples represent only one facet of this ancient conversation. To find another, we must look not toward the sky but into the earth, at a monument so simple and yet so widespread it forms a global phenomenon. Scattered across the landscapes of Western Europe, dotting the hills of the Caucasus Mountains, and standing silent on the Korean peninsula are dolmens. These are structures of stark, elemental power, a massive flat stone slab resting like a tabletop upon two or more upright supporters. Their design is almost primal, a child's drawing of a monument, yet their presence across such vast distances presents one of the most tangible puzzles of the proposed first global era. Often serving as collective resting places, these stone chambers speak directly to a universal human experience, the need to honor those who have passed with a marker meant to endure for eternity. Their structural simplicity, however, is deceptive. Why would this specific tomb design, this stone table, become a near-global architectural choice? The distribution map is startling. From the rocky coasts of Ireland and Portugal, across the plains of France and into the forests of Scandinavia, dolmens stand as ancient sentinels. Then, thousands of miles to the east, they reappear with striking similarity in the highlands of the Caucasus, and further still, across the vastness of Asia on the Korean peninsula. This is not a continuous chain, but a series of clusters separated by immense geographic and cultural voids. The immediate question is one of connection. Does this scattered pattern trace the actual footsteps of migrating peoples, groups who carried the dolmen blueprint with them as part of their cultural identity, planting these stone markers like seeds along their journey? Or does it map the spread of a profoundly resonant idea, a funerary concept so powerful it ignited independently in the minds of different cultures, all facing the same mystery of mortality? The dolmen, in its brutal simplicity, becomes the perfect test case for our two models, diffusion versus convergence. To find an answer, we must move beyond the basic shape and look closely at the details, the subtle fingerprints left by each culture. While the core table-like form is constant, the execution reveals fascinating adaptations. In parts of Western Europe, many dolmens are partially or completely covered by an earthen mound, a great barrow with only the stone chamber accessible through a narrow passage. In the Caucasus, they often stand fully exposed, majestic and solitary against the mountain sky. The orientation of the entrance passages, when they exist, also varies, with some aligned to celestial events like the sunrise, while others seem oriented toward significant local landmarks or simply follow the lie of the land. These are not signs of sloppy copying, but of intelligent adaptation. A migrating people with a rigid blueprint would likely reproduce the chamber and its covering mound precisely. What we see instead looks more like the adoption of a core concept, the stone chamber tomb, which is then customized using local materials, integrated into local landscape beliefs, and aligned with local astronomical knowledge or spiritual practices. The artifacts found within these chambers offer another layer of insight. Across many of these sites, archaeologists have uncovered similar types of objects placed with care alongside the remains: polished stone axes, pottery vessels likely holding offerings, and ornaments of shell or jet. This commonality in grave goods suggests a shared set of beliefs about what was needed for the journey beyond, a parallel spiritual vocabulary that transcends the specific design of the tomb itself. It hints that the connection might be deeper than just architecture. It might be ideological. The dolmen, then, could be the physical container for a package of beliefs about ancestry, the afterlife, and the enduring power of stone. So, what does this widespread phenomenon tell us? The dolmen's journey challenges a simple answer. Its sheer geographic spread makes pure, independent invention in each location seem remarkably coincidental. Yet, the clear cultural adaptations in its construction argue against a single, rigid blueprint imposed by a migrating tribe. The most compelling interpretation may lie in a middle path. Perhaps the dolmen represents a potent mimetic idea, a brilliant solution that diffused not necessarily with a mass migration of people, but through the slow, long-distance exchange of concepts among elite or spiritual groups. A traveling shaman or a group of traders might have described the powerful stone tombs of their homeland, a concept that resonated deeply with listeners far away, who then recreated the essence of the idea using their own stones and their own traditions. The dolmen becomes less a copied building and more a translated symbol, a universal statement in the language of megaliths that said, "Here lies memory anchored in stone." In testing the diffusion model, the dolmen phenomenon suggests that ideas in the ancient world could travel lighter and faster than the people who first conceived them, adapting to new homes while preserving their core, solemn purpose. The recurring spiral is not merely a shape, it is a journey inward, across the ancient world, from the dark chambers of Newgrange to the vast deserts of the American Southwest. This same motif emerges again and again. This leads us to a profound and deeply human possibility that the blueprint for these shared monuments might not have been carried across oceans by travelers, but instead journeyed from within the human mind itself. What if the common architectural language we see is the product of a shared psychological experience, a universal encounter with the landscape of consciousness? This idea is known as the Neuropsychological Model, and it offers a powerful alternative to the diffusion theory. It suggests that the geometric patterns so prevalent in ancient art and architecture, the spirals, concentric circles, zigzags, and lattices, are not cultural imports but biological exports. They are what researchers call entoptic phenomena, visual patterns generated by the structure of our own nervous system, especially during altered states of consciousness. These visions can be triggered in many ways through the rhythmic beat of a drum, the ingestion of certain plants known to induce visionary states, prolonged fasting, or intense sensory deprivation in the darkness of a cave or a sealed tomb. In such a state, the mind's eye does not see random chaos. It sees a predictable catalog of forms, a built-in visual vocabulary of the human brain. A shaman or a ritual participant seeking connection with the spirit world would naturally encounter these powerful, luminous patterns dancing behind their closed eyelids. Upon returning to ordinary awareness, the impulse to make these internal visions external, to fix them in stone or paint them on a wall, would be overwhelming. They were mapping a real, experienced territory, the sacred geography of the mind. This creates a direct psychological bridge between cultures that never met. If a person in ancient Britain and a person in pre-Columbian Peru both underwent similar ritual practices to achieve a trance state, they would very likely see similar spirals and grids. When they instructed their communities to build a monument to honor that profound experience, it is logical that those internal forms would influence the external design. The stone circle, then, might not be a model of the solar system, but a material echo of a luminous ring seen in a vision. The labyrinthine passage into a tomb could replicate the feeling of traveling inward through layers of consciousness. This framework provides a compelling non-diffusionist explanation. It argues that we do not need to invent lost civilizations or prehistoric voyages to explain the similarities. Instead, we simply need to recognize the common hardware of the human brain and the universal human desire to touch the numinous. Similar brains, under similar self-induced conditions, will generate similar sacred art and, by extension, will conceive of similar architectural spaces to house and commemorate those transcendent experiences. The monument becomes a permanent doorway back to that state, a physical anchor for a psychological event. This does not invalidate the possibility of diffusion, but it presents an elegant parallel path. It reminds us that the most powerful connections in the ancient world may not have been across land and sea, but across the shared frontier of human perception, where every culture, in its own way, learned to read the luminous writing on the walls of the mind. The spiral within the mind and the stone in the quarry are two sides of the same mystery, but a third force was likely the most practical driver of all: trade. The movement of ideas in the ancient world often flowed along the same paths as the movement of materials. This was not an abstract exchange of philosophies, but a concrete, hands-on trade in the very substances that built civilization. Communities did not just desire finished goods, they craved the raw ingredients of power and prestige. Rare stones with magical properties, metals that could be shaped into tools and ornaments, hardwoods perfect for crafting handles or ceremonial objects. The quest for these materials forged the first long-distance networks, highways of commerce that stretched across continents. And along these routes, traveling in the minds of the traders and artisans themselves, moved something even more valuable than the cargo: the knowledge of how to transform the earth itself. Consider obsidian, the volcanic glass prized for its razor-sharp edge. Sources of high-quality obsidian were rare and geographically fixed, Yet, we find tools made from Anatolian obsidian in ancient Mesopotamia and Mesoamerican obsidian artifacts hundreds of miles from their volcanic origins. This proves the existence of sophisticated supply chains. Jade, revered across ancient China and Mesoamerica, followed similar sacred routes from quarry to workshop to temple. These were not simple barter trips, they were recurring relational journeys. With each transaction, more than a precious stone changed hands. Stories were told, techniques were demonstrated, and new ideas were planted. A trader from the mountains, showing a chieftain by the sea a brilliant new way to haft an obsidian blade, might also describe the monumental stone temples being built in his homeland. The blueprint for a civilization could travel as gossip alongside a sack of ore. The most transformative knowledge was metallurgy. The secret of smelting copper from rock was not invented everywhere at once. Archaeology suggests it emerged in a few key regions like the Balkans or the Near East, and then spread slowly but unmistakably across Europe and Asia. This was not an idea that could be conveyed with a gesture. It was a complex, fiery alchemy that required direct instruction, the knowledge of which rocks contained copper, how to build a furnace hot enough to extract it, and how to cast it into useful forms. This was the ultimate trade secret. Its diffusion maps a potential network of interaction where the specialist who knew the secret was as valuable as the metal he produced. He was a carrier of a revolutionary technology, and wherever he went, he changed what was possible. This brings us to the monuments themselves. The practical knowledge of quarrying, dressing, and moving multi-ton stones was not common sense. It was elite, guarded expertise. Think of it as the ancient world's most advanced engineering software. How do you identify the right kind of limestone that won't shatter? What is the technique for splitting a granite block using only wood, water, and fire? How do you design a ramp system to lift a 50-ton lintel into place? This was proprietary knowledge, and like any valuable commodity, it could be traded. The most compelling figure in this model is the itinerant master mason. Imagine a specialist or a small guild of them who had perfected the geometry of stone circles or the acoustics of burial chambers. Their skills would make them celebrities in a world striving to build legacies in stone. A local chieftain wanting to erect a monument to outshine his rivals would not just copy what he heard about from afar, he would hire the expert. He would bring in the master mason from a distant culture, providing him with local labor and materials. This master mason would arrive with his own toolkit of knowledge, a set of geometric rules, proven lifting techniques, and perhaps even sacred ratios considered pleasing to the gods. He would adapt his methods to the local stone and the local landscape, but the core of his design would bear his signature, a signature we might now recognize as a shared architectural style across vast distances. In this light, the similarity between two distant megalithic sites is not a sign of a unified global cult, but of a shared contractor, a brilliant engineer whose services were in high demand. Monument design itself becomes an intellectual commodity, bought, sold, and customized. The stone circle is not just a temple, it is a testament to a successful business transaction, a fusion of local ambition and imported technical genius. This model of practical diffusion through trade and specialist travel offers a grounded, human-scale explanation for the patterns we see, one where the connections were not mystical but professional, and where the global era was built, quite literally, one contract at a time. The stones and trade routes tell a story of movement, but the monuments themselves point toward a shared destination, a single, sacred point. At the heart of countless ancient cosmologies lies a profound and identical concept, the axis mundi, the world axis. This is not merely a location, but a living idea, a central pillar believed to connect the heavens, the earth, and the realm below. It was the ultimate coordinate, the place where all layers of existence met. And this invisible, spiritual point did not remain abstract. Our ancestors felt a powerful need to make it real, to build it into the landscape where they could see it, touch it, and gather around it. This deep-seated human impulse to manifest the center may be one of the most powerful forces behind the shared architectural language we see. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia are the clearest declaration of this idea. Their very name translates to mountain house of the gods. These were not just tall buildings, they were artificial, sacred mountains constructed in a land of flat plains. By climbing their tiered sides, priests and rulers were performing a spiritual ascent, moving symbolically closer to the divine realm with every step. The pyramid form, wherever it appears, serves this same symbolic function. Whether in Egypt or Mesoamerica, its sloping sides point toward the celestial peak, replicating the shape of a holy mountain that anchors the world. Even the humble stone circle can be understood as a microcosm of this principle. The circle defines a sacred space, separate from the ordinary world, and at its very center, often marked by a single stone or altar, sits the axis mundi, the still point around which the cosmos turns. This concept blossoms in mythologies across the globe, revealing its universal grip on the human imagination. In Norse tradition, the great world tree Yggdrasil connects the 9 realms, its roots in the underworld and its branches in the heavens. For Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, the colossal Mount Meru stands at the center of all universes, around which the sun, moon, and stars revolve. The ancient Chinese spoke of the mythical Kunlun mountain, the pillar of the sky and the dwelling place of immortals. These are not just stories, they are foundational maps of reality. And when a culture holds such a map, the next logical step is to build a version of it. The monument becomes a physical anchor for the myth, a way to bring the cosmic order down to human scale and stabilize it within the community. This shared symbolism of the center presents a fascinating lens for our mystery. It suggests that the parallel forms we see, the pyramids, the mounds, the concentric circles, might not primarily be about transferred engineering techniques, but about independently answering the same profound spiritual question. How do we, as a community, locate ourselves within an infinite and often frightening cosmos? The answer for cultures from the Andes to Anatolia was to establish a center, to build a world mountain or a world tree in stone and earth. It was an act of cosmic orientation, of creating sacred geography where before there was only wilderness. The need to feel connected, to have a tangible link to the divine and the ancestral, appears to be a universal human driver, one powerful enough to inspire similar monumental solutions on a global scale. So, when we gaze upon these ancient structures, we are not just looking at feats of engineering, we are witnessing the same profound human yearning, made solid and permanent, again and again. The silent stones may hold another secret, one we can only hear. Emerging from the field of acoustic archaeology is a startling discovery that many of these ancient monuments were not just visual spectacles, but carefully tuned instruments. Their builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of sound, designing spaces that could transform noise into something sacred, even altering human consciousness. This suggests a shared science that went beyond geometry, reaching into the very physics of perception. At the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum in Malta, an underground labyrinth carved from solid limestone over 5,000 years ago, a specific chamber resonates at a frequency of 110 Hz. Researchers note that this precise sonic signature can directly influence brainwave patterns, potentially inducing states of deep calm or heightened focus. It is as if the room itself was engineered to be a gateway to an altered state, a built-in technology for transcendence. Above ground, the rollright stones in England present their own auditory mystery. The local legend claims you cannot count the stones the same way twice, but the real enchantment is acoustic. On certain days, with the wind in a particular direction, the circle seems to capture and distort sound, creating whispers and echoes that feel disconnected from any visible source. The stones act as a baffle, sculpting the air itself. Perhaps most poetically, if you stand at the base of the great Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza and clap your hands, the echo that returns is not a simple repetition. It is the distinctive chirp of the sacred Quetzal bird, a sound engineered into the very steps of the structure. This was no accident, it was an architectural invocation, a way to make the spirit of the bird manifest through sound at a ceremonial site. These examples point toward a profound possibility. What if knowledge of resonant frequencies and sound wave manipulation was a key part of the sacred science that may have connected distant cultures? The acoustic properties of a space were not a byproduct of construction, but a primary design goal. Specific sonic environments could be used to deepen ritual, to unify a chanting crowd into a single resonant body, or to help participants enter the trance states where they might encounter the visions that inspired the spiral carvings we find on the walls. In this light, the master mason was also a master of acoustics. He knew which stones would ring like a bell, how the shape of a chamber would focus a whisper, and how to calculate the echo delay in an open plaza to make a leader's voice sound supernaturally powerful. This expertise would have been incredibly valuable, a form of knowledge as potent as metallurgy or astronomy. If such a specialist traveled, his services would be sought not just to build something that looked impressive, but to build something that felt transformative, that could change the atmosphere of a ceremony through sound. The quest to build a proper axis mundi, a true center of the world, required engaging all the senses. A truly sacred space had to be felt in the bones as much as seen with the eyes. The global echoes we detect, from the humming chambers of Malta to the bird-call pyramids of the Yucatan, suggest that this immersive sensory experience was a universal ideal. The stones were meant to be heard, and the message they broadcast across millennia is one of a deep, intuitive understanding of the physical world, an understanding that may have been shared, adapted, and perfected along the same hidden pathways that carried other monumental ideas. This sonic layer adds a profound dimension to the mystery, implying that the connections of a potential first global era were not just visual or ideological, but vibratory, resonating through the very bodies of those who gathered within these engineered spaces. The echoes of these ancient stones lead us to a silent and formidable wall, the challenge of time itself. To truly map a first global era, we must do more than compare shapes and sounds. We must place them in a sequence, constructing a reliable timeline of who built what and when. This is where the mystery becomes a chronological conundrum. The primary tool for this task, radiocarbon dating, provides answers that are often frustratingly broad. When we date organic material like charcoal from a construction fire or bone fragments from an offering, the result is not a single year, but a range of decades or even centuries. This creates a fog around our timeline, a haze of possibilities where a monument in Europe could theoretically be older, younger, or contemporary with one in Asia. Within that fog, a radical question emerges. Could some of these iconic structures be far, far older than our standard histories allow, transforming them from late adopters into the original wellsprings of monumental ideas? One site stands at the center of this chronological revolution, Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. Dated to around 9,600 before Common Era, this complex of massive, T-shaped limestone pillars carved with intricate animals predates Stonehenge by over 6,000 years and the Great Pyramids by a staggering 7 millennia. Its very existence shatters old assumptions. It demonstrates that the drive to carve, move, and erect multi-ton stones in a coordinated ceremonial design emerged not at the end of the Neolithic period, but right at its dawn, before the invention of pottery or settled farming. Göbekli Tepe suggests a very early peak of sophistication, a source of inspiration so ancient it could have fed traditions for thousands of years. If such knowledge existed in Anatolia 11,500 years ago, how far and for how long could its influence have traveled? To find patterns, we must lay the timelines of different monument types side by side. The Great Pyramids of Egypt cluster around 4,500 years ago. The stepped pyramids of Mesoamerica, like those at Teotihuacan, rise much later, around 2,000 years ago. This simple sequence seems to argue for independent invention, a gap too vast for direct connection. But the picture is not so clear. If we look at the broader concept of platform mounds and terraced sacred mountains, the timeline expands and overlaps in intriguing ways. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia are older than Giza, and massive earthwork platforms were being built in North America around the same time as the classic Maya pyramids. The story of megaliths is similarly tangled. The earliest stone circles in Britain date to around 5,000 years ago, while the great dolmen fields of Korea may have been initiated 1,000 years later, or perhaps even earlier, depending on ongoing research. The earthworks of the Amazon and the stone rows of the Caucasus add more threads to this knotted chronological tapestry. This puzzle is critical because direction matters. If we are proposing a flow of ideas, we must have a plausible current. Did the concept of the pyramid originate in one place and slowly ripple outward, being adapted and reinvented across millennia? Or did it emerge in several hearts simultaneously, sparked by a shared human instinct? The current evidence, with its wide date ranges and geographic gaps, does not offer a simple map. It offers a spectrum of possibilities. At one end, we have the diffusionist model, which requires older source sites to have influenced younger ones across viable routes. Göbekli Tepe's extreme age makes it a tantalizing candidate for such a source, a primordial node in a network we are only beginning to perceive. At the other end, the model of convergence argues that when human societies reach a certain level of social complexity and shared spiritual need, the monumental form is a natural, almost inevitable expression. Perhaps the answer lies not in a single direction, but in a pulse. The chronology may not show a neat line from A to B to C, but instead reveal waves of monumental activity, rising and falling in different regions at different times, like a cultural heartbeat across the planet. A peak of megalith building in the Atlantic region might coincide with a lull in the Mediterranean, while a surge of pyramid construction in the Americas might echo a much earlier surge in Egypt, not through direct contact, but through a similar solving of societal and spiritual equations. The stones themselves are steadfast, but our understanding of their dates remains fluid, a constant conversation between new discoveries in the ground and new interpretations in the lab. To solve this conundrum is to find the rhythm within the silence, the hidden tempo of humanity's first great architectural conversation. Yet for every grand vision of interconnectedness, there stands an equally compelling counterargument. The independent invention school of thought presents a powerful and elegant challenge. Its proponents ask a simple, profound question: why must similarity always imply connection? They argue that human beings, separated by vast distances but united by the same basic needs and cognitive hardware, are perfectly capable of arriving at the same brilliant solutions entirely on their own. This is the principle of convergent cultural evolution, and it is a force we see at work throughout history. Consider agriculture, the very foundation of civilization. We know for a fact that farming was not invented in one place and spread to all others. It emerged independently in at least 7 different regions around the globe, from the Fertile Crescent to the Yangtze River Valley, from Mesoamerica to the highlands of New Guinea. Different peoples, domesticating different plants like wheat, rice, maize, and taro, all made the same monumental leap from foraging to cultivating. They were not copying each other. They were each responding to environmental pressures and opportunities with the same spark of human ingenuity. Could the same not be true for monumental architecture? When you break down the pyramid, its logic becomes almost mathematical. If your goal is to build the tallest, most stable structure possible using stone blocks, what shape do you choose? A wide base that narrows as it rises is not just a spiritual symbol, it is a fundamental principle of engineering, the only way to prevent collapse under immense weight. The pyramid is not a mysterious shared secret, it is the inevitable conclusion of a universal physics problem. Similarly, the circle holds a natural, intuitive power. It requires no ruler, no right angle. You can create one with a rope and a stake. It is the shape of equality, where every point on the perimeter is the same distance from the center, making it a perfect democratic form for gathering, for ritual, for defining a sacred space apart from the linear world outside. These forms feel innate because in many ways they are. The independent invention perspective urges us to look beyond the superficial resemblance of shapes and dig into the profound differences in meaning and method. Two cultures might both build a pyramid, but what that pyramid represented could be worlds apart. For an Egyptian pharaoh, the smooth-sided pyramid was a solar ramp, a vehicle to ascend and merge with the sun god Ra. For a Mesoamerican king, the stepped pyramid was a sacred mountain, a stage for ritual reenactments of creation myths, often involving practices very different from those along the Nile. The construction techniques, while both advanced, also show distinct fingerprints. Egyptian pyramids employed massive quarried blocks moved on sledges and ramps, while Mesoamerican pyramids often used a rubble core faced with cut stone. These are not the signs of a single instruction manual, but of different engineering cultures solving similar problems with the materials and knowledge available to them. This view does not diminish the awe we feel, it redirects it. It suggests that the true wonder is not a lost global civilization, but the incredible, parallel creativity of the human mind itself. It is the story of humanity's separate choirs, all singing in harmony without ever having met. To build a balanced investigation, we must rigorously stress-test the global interconnection hypothesis against this powerful logic of convergence. If the similarities are truly deep, extending to precise astronomical alignments, acoustic properties, and complex geometric ratios, the case for some form of contact or shared ancestry grows stronger. But if the similarities are primarily in the broad, functional shape while the underlying intent, mythology, and technical execution diverge widely, then independent invention becomes the more parsimonious and perhaps more marvelous explanation. The silent stones force us to choose between two equally grand narratives, one of a world whispering together and another of multiple worlds in glorious isolation, dreaming the same dreams. The stones may be silent, but the stories told around them are not. Across the scattered continents, in languages that have no known historical link, humanity's oldest myths whisper with a familiarity that is haunting. These are not echoes of architecture, but of narrative, the shared dreams of our species preserved in folklore. When we listen, we hear the same fundamental stories told again and again. A great flood that cleanses the world appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, in the biblical book of Genesis, and in the legends of the Maya. The serpent or dragon, a creature of both chaos and hidden wisdom, slithers through the mythologies of ancient China, the Norse sagas, and the oral traditions of indigenous Americas. And almost universally, there is a longing for a lost golden age, a time before a great fall or a cataclysm, when people lived in harmony with wiser beings or a more perfect order. These parallels are so widespread that they force a question upon us. Are these simply universal archetypes born from common human fears and hopes, as the Neuropsychological Model might suggest? Or could they be distant, distorted memories of real, shared experiences from a time when the world was more connected? This is the realm of comparative mythology, and while it requires cautious steps, it offers a tantalizing layer to our investigation. The most tangible link to our monuments may be the myth of the world tree or world mountain. This is the axis mundi, the cosmic center, made narrative. We find Yggdrasil in the Norse Eddas, the immense Ashvattha tree in Hindu texts, and the sacred cedar in Mesopotamian lore. In the Americas, many nations speak of a great tree connecting the underworld, the earth, and the sky. This is not just a random symbol, it is a direct mythological counterpart to the physical monuments. The ziggurat was an artificial world mountain. The pyramid was a stone representation of that primordial peak. The central pillar of a stone circle could be seen as the trunk of the world tree, marking the axis around which the heavens turn. The myth and the monument are two expressions of the same deep-seated human need to locate a sacred center, to find the still point in the turning world. This synergy suggests that the architectural forms we have catalogued were not empty shapes, but physical anchors for a near-universal cosmological story. Another recurring motif is equally provocative, the story of the knowledge-bearer. Across cultures, myths tell of powerful beings, often sky gods or civilizing heroes, who descended to teach humanity the foundations of society. The Sumerians spoke of the Apkallu, 7 sages who emerged from the sea to impart wisdom. In the Andes, the god Viracocha was said to have traveled the land, teaching people agriculture, language, and masonry. The Maya revered Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, as a bringer of knowledge and culture. Even in distant Oceania, figures like Maui are credited with fishing up islands and stealing fire for humanity. These are not tales of conquest but of instruction. They speak of a transfer of technology, of agriculture, of law, and of sacred arts. Could these stories be the mythologized memory of actual events, the arrival of individuals or groups who carried transformative ideas? Within the framework of a potential first global era, these narratives take on a new resonance. They could represent a culture's way of explaining a sudden leap in sophistication, attributing it to divine or semi-divine teachers who may, in reality, have been travelers, master masons, or seafarers from a distant shore, bearing the very knowledge we see etched in stone. The most controversial frontier lies in language itself. While mainstream linguistics firmly maintains that languages in the Old and New Worlds developed in complete isolation, a few researchers point to tantalizing, if hotly debated, phonetic echoes. They note similarities between certain root words for basic concepts, like the word for mother or water, across vast divides. These proposed connections are far from proven and sit at the very edge of academic acceptance. They are mentioned here not as evidence, but as a representation of the ultimate question this mystery pushes us to ask. If ideas about building, astronomy, and mythology could travel, could the most fundamental tool of all, language, have carried traces of that ancient exchange? It is a speculative leap, but it highlights the profound human desire to find connection in our deepest past. We must tread carefully here. Mythology is not a history book, and similarities can easily arise from the common soil of human psychology. The flood myth could emerge independently anywhere catastrophic flooding occurs. The serpent is a powerful, almost universal symbol found in nature. Yet, when these narrative threads, the world tree, the civilizing hero, the great flood are woven together with the architectural and archaeological evidence, they begin to form a richer, more textured tapestry. They suggest that the connections of a deep time past may not have been solely about trading obsidian or hiring a master mason. They may also have been about trading stories, sharing a framework for understanding the cosmos, and passing down parables about where knowledge comes from. The monuments gave the myths a stage, and the myths, in turn, gave the monuments a soul. Together, they tell a story not just of stones aligned to the sun, but of a human family, perhaps far more extended than we knew, trying to make sense of the world through shared symbols and shared dreams. The debate over shared blueprints inevitably arrives at the very substance of the monuments themselves. Beyond the shapes and alignments lies a more fundamental mystery: the stone. At certain ancient sites, the material behaves in ways that challenge our understanding of prehistoric technology. Some researchers point to locations where the stonework is so precise and the material itself so unusual that they propose a startling idea. What if the builders were not just cutting and moving rock, but in some cases actually casting it, like a form of ancient, advanced concrete? This theory of geopolymer or man-made stone suggests a technological transfer so sophisticated it would rewrite the history of engineering. The evidence for this idea is both visual and scientific. Look closely at the famous megaliths at Pumapunku in the Bolivian highlands. Here you find blocks of andesite, an incredibly hard stone, carved with geometric complexity that seems almost machined. The edges are razor-sharp, the surfaces perfectly flat, and the interlocking channels cut with a precision that defies simple chisel work. Even more puzzling are the H-blocks, stones with a series of identical, recessed notches that look less like hand carving and more like components stamped from a mold. How could a culture without hardened metal tools achieve such flawless, repetitive geometry in one of the toughest stones on Earth? Proponents of the geopolymer theory argue they did not carve it, they cast it. They suggest the builders possessed a lost recipe, a slurry of crushed local rock, mineral binders, and perhaps plant-based acids that could be poured into wooden forms to create artificial stone blocks. Once hardened, these geopolymer blocks would be lighter than solid rock, easier to move and position, and could explain the uncanny, seamless joins. Similar questions arise in Egypt. While the Great Pyramids are famously made of massive limestone blocks, some of the casing stones and the interiors of certain temples show a different story. There are blocks with embedded organic material like straw or hair, which some argue are telltale signs of a cast material, not quarried stone. Other blocks exhibit a composition that seems inconsistent with natural limestone from known quarries. The French materials scientist Joseph Davidovits became a leading voice for this theory, proposing that the pyramid blocks were essentially a form of reagglomerated limestone, a kind of ancient concrete poured in place. This, he argued, would explain the lack of tool marks, the perfect fits without mortar, and the incredible speed at which the structures might have been assembled. If true, it transforms the construction from a story of brute force to one of advanced chemistry. The implications for a first global era are profound. The independent invention of basic pyramid shapes is one thing, but the independent discovery of a complex geopolymer formula, a high-tech material science involving precise chemical knowledge and controlled processes in two separate hemispheres. That strains the limits of coincidence. It suggests the potential transfer of not just an architectural form, but an entire industrial recipe, a proprietary technology for creating the very building blocks of civilization. Such knowledge would be more valuable than gold and more closely guarded than any map. Its movement would indicate a deep, sustained contact, perhaps through guilds of master builders who held the secret of the artificial stone. However, mainstream archaeology and geology offer strong counterarguments. For Pumapunku, many experts maintain that the precision is a testament to incredible skill and patience, not lost technology. They point to evidence of abrasive techniques using sand, water, and copper tools applied over generations. The consistent notches could be achieved with simple jigs and templates, a demonstration of refined craftsmanship rather than casting. In Egypt, extensive geological studies have matched the pyramid stones to specific quarries, finding the fossil signatures and mineral content that confirm they are natural limestone. The presence of organic material, critics say, could come from the mortar used between blocks or from later contamination, not from the casting process itself. The idea of poured stone, while captivating, faces the hurdle of scale, where no evidence of the vast mixing pits or formwork needed for such an operation has been found at Giza. Modern materials science is now entering the conversation, using tools the ancients never had. Researchers apply techniques like scanning electron microscopy to examine the microstructure of these controversial stones. They look for bubbles, flow patterns, or chemical gradients that would indicate a poured, man-made material versus the crystalline structure of naturally formed rock. The results so far are mixed and hotly debated. Some studies on fragments from Egyptian sites show microstructures consistent with a quick setting reaction, supporting the geopolymer idea. Other studies firmly conclude the stones are definitively natural. This scientific duel is ongoing, a quiet revolution happening in laboratories rather than excavations. So, was there a global recipe for artificial stone? The answer remains elusive, caught between compelling anomalies and rigorous traditional analysis. Yet, the very existence of this debate is illuminating. It shows that our investigation into a connected ancient world cannot stop at comparing finished monuments. We must drill down, literally, into their molecular makeup. The quest pushes us to consider the builders not just as astronomers and architects, but as potential chemists and material scientists. Whether the stones were cut or cast, the enduring mystery of how they were made with such perfection continues to suggest a level of knowledge that feels extraordinary, a technological peak that echoes across the continents, waiting for its final, definitive analysis. The quest for a source leads us to a profound and haunting possibility. To explain the global echoes we see, some have looked toward the horizon of human memory, to the stories of places now lost beneath the waves. This is the idea of a silenced source civilization, a progenitor culture of such influence that its architectural and ideological fingerprints were stamped upon the world before it vanished from the map and nearly from history. It is a speculative avenue, one often wrapped in the mythic names of Atlantis or Lemuria, and it is met with deep skepticism by mainstream archaeology for a very good reason. It lacks the direct, irrefutable evidence that science requires. Yet, to explore it logically is not to chase fantasy, but to confront a real and sobering truth about our past. The archaeological record is not a complete book, but a collection of surviving pages, and some of the most important chapters may be missing, submerged or buried beyond our current reach. The logical premise is this: for most of human history, global sea levels were significantly lower than they are today. Vast, fertile coastal plains, now underwater, were once dry land, prime real estate for early human settlement. What if, during the last ice age, a culture flourished on such a coastline? A culture that, driven by its maritime environment, developed advanced seafaring, sophisticated astronomy for navigation, and monumental architecture as a testament to its beliefs. This would not have been a global empire of science fiction, but a coastal society, a network of communities living along now drowned shelves, trading, exploring, and exchanging ideas. Their knowledge, carried by sailors and traders, could have rippled outward, influencing the emerging cultures on the higher ground that would become the continents we know. Then, as the glaciers melted and the seas rose, this source culture would have faced a slow, inexorable retreat, its heartlands gradually swallowed, its central cities lost, and its story fragmented into the flood myths found in countless traditions. From this perspective, the shared monuments we see inland are not the originals, but the echoes, adaptations built by those who received the knowledge from the lost teachers of the drowned world. This idea of a ghost culture is not without a historical parallel that gives us pause. For centuries, the Minoan civilization of ancient Crete was considered pure legend, a mythical realm of King Minos and the labyrinth mentioned only in Greek epic. There was no archaeological proof it ever existed until, in the early 20th century, excavations began to uncover the sprawling palace of Knossos with its vivid frescoes and advanced architecture. The myth became history. This reminds us that our understanding is always provisional, and that absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence. Could there be other, even older cultures, still waiting in the silts of continental shelves or beneath desert sands, whose existence we can only infer from the puzzling similarities they left behind in their successor societies? The hypothetical source is not a technological super-civilization, but a seminal one, a cultural wellspring whose innovations in stoneworking, celestial observation, and social organization became the foundational toolkit for others. The value of this speculative exercise is not in proving a lost continent, but in expanding our imagination about human prehistory. It forces us to acknowledge the vast, unknown chapters, the coastal migrations and interactions that are literally submerged. It encourages a humility about the limits of our knowledge and a recognition that the story of human ingenuity may be far longer, more interconnected, and more complex than the fragments we have so far assembled can tell. The silent stones on land may, in fact, be answering the call of stones we cannot yet see, monuments sleeping on the ocean floor, holding the missing links to a conversation that once spanned a very different world. The silent clues buried in jungle and plain are now being read with new eyes, not human eyes, but the penetrating gaze of lasers and algorithms. Our search for a hidden network has entered a new era, powered by technologies that allow us to see the ancient world as a whole, to map its whispers on a scale once unimaginable. At the forefront is LiDAR, light detection and ranging. This revolutionary tool works by sending millions of laser pulses from an aircraft down through dense vegetation. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, it creates a detailed, three-dimensional map of the ground surface, digitally stripping away the forest canopy. What has it revealed? In places like the jungles of Cambodia, around the Temple of Angkor Wat, LiDAR has unveiled sprawling, low-density urban complexes, canals, and roads, transforming our understanding of that civilization from a collection of temples into a vast, engineered landscape. In Central America, it has exposed entire ceremonial centers in regions once considered impenetrable, showing networks of causeways linking sites across miles of rainforest. These are not just new dots on a map, they are entire chapters of human settlement, previously invisible, now laid bare. This technology is doing more than finding lost cities. It is revealing the true scale of ancient planning, showing us that what we thought were isolated monuments were often the hearts of vast, interconnected sacred geographies. This allows us to ask new questions. Could a ceremonial causeway in Mesoamerica reflect the same underlying design logic as a ceremonial avenue in ancient Britain? We can now compare their precise orientations and relationships to the landscape on a continental scale. That scale is managed by another transformative tool, Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. Think of GIS as the ultimate digital canvas for the ancient world. It allows researchers to layer every piece of data imaginable onto a single map, the location of monuments, their astronomical alignments, the sources of construction materials, ancient trade routes, even topography and hydrology. By plotting thousands of sites simultaneously, patterns emerge that are utterly invisible from the ground. Researchers can run complex analyses, searching for geometric relationships between sites. Do groups of monuments form perfect triangles or align along specific ley lines? Do they cluster around certain geological features or ancient coastlines? GIS turns the landscape itself into a dataset, letting the stones speak in the language of mathematics and geography. This data-driven approach is shifting the inquiry from speculation to systematic investigation. Instead of asking if two distant pyramids look similar, we can now ask if they share the same precise geodetic coordinates, or if they are positioned according to a shared geometric rule relative to other sites in their region. We are moving from comparing artifacts to comparing systems. The digital map we are building today is the most powerful tool yet for visualizing the potential connections of a first global era. It allows us to test the diffusion hypothesis in ways our predecessors could only dream of. We can model ancient sea currents and wind patterns to plot the most likely routes for prehistoric voyages, and then see if those pathways align with the distribution of specific monument types or construction techniques. We can analyze the celestial sightlines from thousands of sites at once to see if a shared astronomical tradition, like tracking the Pleiades star cluster, truly does span continents. This is not about proving a single, unified ancient world, but about illuminating the complex, pulsating web of interactions that may have existed. Each new LiDAR scan, each GIS analysis adds another thread to that web. The mystery is no longer confined to the dirt under a trowel. It lives in the cloud, in vast databases where patterns wait to be discovered. This technological leap brings us closer than ever to seeing the ancient world through the eyes of its builders, not as a collection of separate territories, but as a single, interconnected canvas, upon which they inscribed their understanding of the cosmos, one aligned stone at a time. The search for ancient connections carries a profound responsibility in the present. This is not merely an academic puzzle. It touches the very way we see ourselves and our shared past. For centuries, the story of civilization was often told through a narrow lens, focusing on a few celebrated cradles like Mesopotamia and Egypt, while the monumental achievements of indigenous peoples in the Americas, Africa, and Oceania were marginalized or dismissed. This traditional narrative can subtly suggest that human progress flowed in one direction, from a single enlightened source to everyone else. When we explore ideas of a connected ancient world, we must tread this ethical ground with great care. The danger lies in replacing one biased story with another, simply proposing that all advanced knowledge diffused from a single, lost super-civilization risks repeating the old era. It can strip indigenous cultures of their own innate genius, reducing their breathtaking pyramids and precise observatories to mere copies of a foreign blueprint. That is not discovery, it is a new form of erasure. The true goal of this investigation is far more beautiful and complex. It is to move beyond the simplistic model of a teacher and student, or a source and a copy. Instead, we can envision a world of multilateral exchange, a vast, slow conversation among countless creative peoples. Think of it not as a single torch passed from hand to hand, but as many campfires scattered across a dark plain. The embers from one fire could be carried to light another, but each community would build their own blaze using their own wood, arranged in their own unique design, to warm themselves and tell their own stories. The shared knowledge of astronomy or stoneworking was like that traveling ember, a powerful idea. But what each culture built with that idea, the specific myths they wove around it, the local materials they used, and the unique societal needs they addressed, that was their own magnificent invention. This perspective allows us to honor both connection and autonomy. It lets us credit the master navigators of Polynesia for their unparalleled skill in crossing the Pacific, while also recognizing that their star lore may have deep roots in an older, shared human understanding of the heavens. It allows us to admire the Maya for their independent development of the most sophisticated calendar system in the ancient world, while still wondering if the core concept of pyramid building as a symbolic world mountain was an idea whose time had come across the globe. Navigating this terrain requires us to consciously decolonize our imagination of the past. It means setting aside the outdated notion that certain peoples were incapable of innovation without outside help. The evidence shouts otherwise. It means listening to indigenous oral histories not as myths, but as valid records of deep time, which may hold clues about migration, environmental change, and encounters with others. The framework of a potential first global era, when approached ethically, does not diminish anyone's ancestors. It can do the opposite. It can elevate them from isolated curiosities to active participants in a grand human story. It suggests that from the very beginning, our species was characterized by both incredible diversity and a deep capacity for exchange. The monuments stand not as trophies for one culture to claim, but as a collective inheritance, a testament to the adaptive brilliance of humanity in all its varied homelands. This shift in thinking fosters something vital, a sense of shared human heritage that transcends modern borders. It reminds us that the urge to reach for the stars and build in stone is a thread woven into the fabric of all our histories. By exploring these ancient connections with respect and nuance, we are not stealing credit from anyone. We are recovering a more truthful, interconnected, and ultimately more hopeful story of who we are and who we have always been together. The allure of a forgotten global past has always attracted more than just archaeologists. For every careful scholar measuring stone alignments, there have been others weaving tales of ancient astronauts, lost super civilizations, and mysterious artifacts that defy all known history. This shadow world of pseudo-archaeology presents a serious challenge, not because its ideas are compelling, but because they actively pollute the well of genuine inquiry with hoaxes, logical fallacies, and sensationalized storytelling. To navigate this landscape in search of truth, we must first learn to recognize the counterfeit. Some of the most famous artifacts presented as proof of impossible contact are outright fabrications. Take the iconic crystal skulls, often attributed to Aztec or Maya origins and said to possess mystical powers. Detailed analysis using modern microscopy has revealed telltale marks of 19th-century jewelers' wheels and polishing compounds, tools the ancient Mesoamericans did not possess. They are beautiful works of art, but their provenance is Victorian, not pre-Columbian. Similarly, the so-called Michigan relics, a vast collection of supposedly ancient tablets covered in crude hieroglyphs, were conclusively exposed as a hoax created by a local farmer for profit, their inscriptions a jumble of copied symbols from unrelated cultures. These forgeries were designed to feed a public appetite for mystery, and they succeeded in creating decades of distraction. The harm they cause is real. They divert attention and resources from legitimate research, and they foster a deep cynicism that can make all unconventional ideas seem equally foolish. To protect the integrity of the search, we must cultivate a toolkit for critical thinking. One of the most common pitfalls is the logical fallacy of cherry-picking. This occurs when someone selects only the data that supports their thrilling narrative, while ignoring the overwhelming body of evidence that contradicts it. For instance, a theory might highlight a superficial similarity between a symbol in Egypt and one in Peru, while completely disregarding the vast differences in language, pottery styles, burial practices, and radiocarbon dates that firmly place those cultures in separate worlds and times. Another red flag is the argument from silence, the claim that something must be true because mainstream science cannot yet disprove it. This reverses the burden of proof. True discovery requires positive evidence, not the absence of disproof. Perhaps the most critical tool is chronological literacy. A compelling story of diffusion requires a plausible timeline. The source idea must be older than the proposed copy. Pseudo-archaeology often hand-waves this away, suggesting that all the monuments are vastly older than accepted science allows, or that timelines are hopelessly corrupted. While healthy skepticism about dating methods is part of science, dismissing chronology entirely is an abandonment of the historical method itself. It is the equivalent of trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle while insisting the pieces can fit together in any order you like. The goal of this skeptical analysis is not to shut down wonder, but to channel it productively. By understanding how hoaxes are made and why they are believable, by recognizing the fallacies that trap even well-intentioned thinkers, we arm ourselves against misinformation. This empowers us to engage with the genuine mysteries, like the precise astronomical alignments or the Geopolymer debate, on firmer ground. We learn to ask better questions. Does this theory account for all the evidence or just the convenient parts? Does it follow the established rules of evidence, or does it ask us to suspend them for a more exciting story? Separating rigorous scholarship from baseless speculation is the essential work that allows the true investigation into humanity's early connections to proceed with credibility. It ensures that the first global era, if it existed, will be discovered through the slow, meticulous accumulation of evidence, not through the seductive echo chamber of wishful thinking. This disciplined approach clears the fog, allowing us to see the actual contours of the past with greater clarity. The evidence lies scattered like pieces from a dozen different puzzles. Yet when we step back, certain shapes begin to align, suggesting a grander, coherent picture hidden beneath the fragments. So, can we assemble these clues into a tentative map of that proposed first global era? The answer is not a single line on a globe, but a living, breathing network. Imagine not a lone shining city, but a constellation of brilliant hubs, each a zone of profound innovation. Think of the Fertile Crescent with its first cities and writing, the Indus Valley with its meticulous urban planning, the early Andean cultures mastering altitude and architecture, the river valleys of China birthing their own unique traditions. These were not copies of one another, but independent powerhouses of human ingenuity. Our model suggests these hubs did not glow in isolation. They were connected by a slow-motion web where ideas traveled at the speed of a walking trader, a migrating family, or a sailing boat riding the monsoon winds. This was not an empire with a capital and colonies, but something far more organic, a shared intellectual climate spanning continents. The exchange likely flowed through multiple channels. Bulk trade in materials like obsidian or copper created the physical highways. The movement of people due to climate shifts or new opportunities carried cultural memory. And perhaps most crucially, there was a diplomacy of the elite, a long-distance conversation among priestly orders, master builders, and ruling families who recognized value in one another's sacred sciences. They exchanged not just goods but gifts of knowledge, the blueprint for a new kind of temple, the secret of a celestial alignment, the ratio for a perfect stone joint. This network was not static. It pulsed like a heartbeat over millennia. A route between two hubs might strengthen for centuries as trade flourished, then fade as deserts expanded or political winds changed, only for a new connection to form elsewhere. The monumental idea of the pyramid, for instance, might have shimmered into existence in one region. Its core concept of a sacred mountain then caught and carried along these webs, being reimagined in local stone and myth in a dozen different lands. What we are mapping, then, is less a territory and more a state of mind. It was a global village of the Neolithic and Bronze Age, a world where distant cultures were engaged in the same profound project, reaching for the cosmos and attempting to anchor its order into the earth. They were all asking the same big questions about life, death, and humanity's place in the universe, and they were comparing notes, however indirectly. The stones they left behind are the receipts of that ancient conversation. This model is inherently testable. It predicts that where we find clusters of shared ideas, we should also find evidence of ancient contact, not necessarily in identical artifacts, but in traces of exchange, foreign materials at a site, adopted technologies, or artistic motifs that blend local and distant styles. It asks archaeologists to look for the pathways between the monuments, not just the monuments themselves. The map we are drawing is tentative, sketched in the light of current evidence, and it will be redrawn with every new discovery. But it offers a powerful framework, one that replaces the simplistic choice between pure isolation and a single lost source with a dynamic, interconnected vision of our early world. It suggests that the dawn of civilization was not a series of separate sunrises, but a slow, spreading glow where the light of innovation passed from one horizon to another, illuminating the shared mind of humanity. This proposed map of our past does more than rearrange ancient history. It quietly reshapes our sense of human identity. If the whispers of a first global era hold truth, then the traits we consider most modern, our curiosity, our drive to explore, and our genius for exchanging complex ideas, are not recent inventions. They are ancient, perhaps fundamental to who we are. The story changes from one of scattered, isolated sparks to one of a slow-burning, interconnected fire. Our ancestors emerged not as primitive tribes huddled in fearful isolation, but as potential long-distance communicators, as collaborators across breathtaking distances. They may have looked across a sea or a mountain range not with dread, but with a question, wondering who was out there and what they knew. This realization carries a profound and hopeful implication for us today. It suggests that the urge to reach out, to trade not just goods but knowledge, to learn from the distant other, is woven into the oldest chapters of our story. Those shared monuments, then, become more than archaeological sites. They transform into symbols of a deep, ancient human impulse to connect, to build bridges of stone and meaning across the vast divides of a young world. They stand as testament to a primal understanding that we are stronger, wiser, and more inspired when we are in conversation, even if that conversation took generations and crossed uncharted oceans. This perspective challenges a persistent and often harmful myth, the idea of a pure, isolated cultural lineage. Our histories have often been written as if cultures developed in sealed containers, their achievements arising solely from within. But if the first global era hypothesis has merit, it shows our ancestors were likely interconnected, constantly hybridizing ideas, just as we do today. A spiritual concept from one region could merge with the engineering prowess of another, giving birth to a new form of temple. A method of star tracking could be adapted to a different hemisphere's sky. This does not diminish any culture's originality, it reveals their adaptive intelligence. They were not passive receivers, but active participants in a grand, slow-motion dialogue. They took the embers of shared knowledge and built their own unique and magnificent fires. Recognizing this can inspire a new sense of global unity and shared legacy. It means that the pyramid in Egypt and the pyramid in Mexico are not rivals for a title of first or best. They are cousins born from a similar family of ideas that traveled and transformed. It means the stone circle in Britain and the standing stones in Ethiopia are part of the same human conversation about sacred space. This reframes our entire heritage. We are not merely inheritors of separate, competing civilizations. We are the children of a network. Our differences are the beautiful results of local adaptation, but our underlying drive to comprehend the cosmos and leave a mark upon the earth appears to be a common thread. Ultimately, this exploration asks us to look at those silent stones and see a reflection of our own deepest nature. The monuments are anchors in time, yes, but they are also messages. They tell us that long before the internet, before global shipping lanes, before written language, humanity may have been engaged in the project of building a shared world, one aligned stone, one observed solstice, one exchanged story at a time. They remind us that the desire to connect, to understand, and to create meaning together is perhaps the most ancient and enduring blueprint of all. The map we have drawn is still a sketch, filled with vast, uncharted territories. The most compelling questions about this potential first global era are not behind us, they lie ahead, waiting for the tools and the collaborative spirit of our own time. Future research holds the key, and it is moving in thrilling new directions. One path leads into the very earth, to the resting places of the builders themselves. By carefully analyzing ancient DNA from individuals buried near these monuments, scientists could trace lineages and migrations with unprecedented clarity. Did the community that raised the stones of Karnak share distant ancestors with those who erected the stelae in Ethiopia? Genetic clues might reveal if a master builder's knowledge traveled with his family line across continents, or if local populations adopted foreign ideas without a major influx of people. Another clue lies within the monument's substance. Advanced techniques like core drilling can extract tiny samples from the heart of a megalith. Analyzing the mineral signature of that stone can act like a geologic fingerprint, pinpointing the exact quarry it came from, even if that quarry is hundreds of miles away. This could map prehistoric trade routes in stone, revealing which cultures had the networks and the will to move mountains, literally, to fulfill a sacred vision. Perhaps the most promising frontier is not on land but beneath the waves. If coastal societies were the crucial links in this ancient network, their most important sites may now be submerged. Underwater archaeology, equipped with submersibles and advanced sonar, is poised to search the continental shelves for drowned settlements, ports, or even ceremonial centers. Discovering such a hub could provide the missing physical evidence for a maritime web, a tangible node in the proposed network. This quest demands a new kind of science, one that breaks down the walls between disciplines. The future belongs to interdisciplinary teams where archaeologists work alongside data scientists, who can build algorithms to detect subtle patterns across thousands of sites that the human eye would miss. Climatologists can model ancient weather patterns to understand the environmental pressures that forced migrations or opened new corridors. Experts in complexity theory can help model how ideas might have flowed and evolved across such a vast, slow-moving system. To make this possible, we need a foundational tool, a collaborative, open-source global database. Imagine a digital atlas where every known ancient monument, from the smallest standing stone to the largest pyramid, is catalogued not just by location, but by a universal set of attributes: its precise astronomical alignments, its construction techniques, its geometric ratios, the materials used. Researchers from every nation could contribute to and analyze this shared resource, comparing a temple in Cambodia with one in Peru at the click of a button, searching for the deep patterns that define our shared heritage. This is not a task for a single university or country. It is a project for humanity, a systematic effort to listen to the collective story our ancestors left in stone. The next chapter in unraveling humanity's earliest connections will be written not with a single trowel, but with satellites, sequencers, and supercomputers, fueled by a global cooperation that itself echoes the interconnected spirit it seeks to understand. The landscape of our past shimmers with a new and profound possibility. Our journey across the map of shared monument designs does not end with a simple verdict, but opens into a deeper understanding. We have listened to stones that whisper of distant conversations, traced the celestial maps that guided hands across continents, and followed the ghostly wake of ideas that may have sailed forgotten seas. The evidence laid before us presents a choice, not between right and wrong, but between two equally magnificent stories. One story speaks of a literal first global era, a time of slow, profound connection where knowledge flowed like a hidden river beneath the surface of the ancient world. The other celebrates the breathtaking parallel genius of the human spirit, where cultures staring at the same sky and wrestling with the same existential questions arrived at similar monumental answers in glorious isolation. Perhaps the most transformative insight is that the investigation itself, the very act of asking these questions, irrevocably changes how we see the tapestry of time. It teaches us to look for patterns in the silence, to question the boundaries we have drawn on maps and in history books. These ancient structures, whether built through shared inspiration or shared knowledge, stand united as a testament to something fundamental. They are proof of humanity's enduring, universal quest to find meaning, to reach for the cosmos, and to leave a mark that whispers we were here and we wondered. This pursuit connects the pyramid builder to the stone circle shaper across millennia. In searching for a network that may have connected them, we have woven a new one of our own, a network of curiosity that spans our modern world. The greatest monument we uncover through this exploration may not be a single temple or tomb. It is the vast, invisible map of our shared human heritage, a legacy of inquisitive minds and boundless creativity written not in stone alone, but in the very impulse to build, to align, and to understand. This is not an ending, but an invitation to keep looking at the old stones with new eyes, to keep questioning the stories we have been told, and to continue connecting the dots of our deep, collective past. The mystery is the map, and the journey is just beginning.